Hey everybody! Bet you didn't expect me to be missing school today. And to be honest with you, I didn't either. Something came up. I'm sorry I had to miss, but I'll try to be back as soon as I can. I'm getting tired of missing so much school. It's very unusual. But I guess that's what happens when you have little kids, huh? Anyways, here's what's going on today. We were talking about Plessy versus Ferguson yesterday, and I gave you a reading about Brown versus the Board of Education and some questions to go along with that. And so we're going to discuss what you found in the reading through this video. Like, that'll actually work, but just play along. So check it out. This is this page here, obviously, hopefully you can see, is the questions. And like the other days that we've had, time to go over questions, I really want to focus on these first three understanding questions. This is where it really tells me if we got what we wanted to get out of the case. So it says, in your own words, explain the circumstances of the case. Well, since I can't hear you explain it, let me just explain it for you. So you know this. You have this little girl. Her name is Linda Brown, and Linda goes to school in Kansas, Topeka, Kansas, and she's African American, and so she has to go to a school that's 21 blocks away from her home, while there is a white school much closer. So, under the Plessy versus Ferguson separate but equal doctrine, that's all okay, right? As long as the school board of Topeka, Kansas is giving her a school, it doesn't matter that it's a segregated school or, separate from the white school. Well, Linda Brown's family and the leaders of a civil rights activist group called the NAACP want to use this opportunity to challenge that law. So they bring court case against the Topeka, Kansas Board of Education, and in 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court hears the case. And they basically argue, and now I'm doing number two now, they compare the arguments. The Brown side argued that a couple things. Number one, the education that Linda was getting at what we'll call the black school, it was not as good as the education that the white kids were getting at the white school. The facilities were inferior. The desks and the textbooks, even the quality of teachers, try as hard as they might, it was not as good an education. And so that, in their opinion, they argued, was not equality. It was separate and disequal. So it doesn't follow the Plessy versus Ferguson thing. The second thing they argued, though, was really a kind of an interesting point to make, especially in sort of a legal sense. But they argued that forcing students to be segregated, it creates a sense of inferiority, in that students in the segregated school, the black school, they were being essentially given the message that they were not good enough. Which, well, I don't know what other message you could get from that. So that is, yeah, that's my opinion, that's right. The message was that. And this group, Brown's side, argued that's not equality. You shouldn't separate a group, tell them they're not good enough, and call it equality. Hogwash. So that's their argument. Now, for the school board, of course, they argued, no, listen, we're doing what the rules said under the Plessy versus Ferguson. We're giving her a school, separate, it's equal, don't worry about it. Well, we'll see. Let's go to number three, summarize the court's decision in our own words. Thankfully, we know what happened. The Supreme Court, yes, they got it right this time. They got it wrong. They got it so wrong with the Dred Scott decision. Morally, right? They followed the law, but man, I wish they could change things in the Dred Scott decision. I wish they had done it differently in Plessy versus Ferguson. But finally, the Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, they nailed it. 9-0, unanimous. 100% of the Supreme Court justices said, you know what? This is not okay. Segregation in education has no place. And that's actually where we're going to now transition over here. There is no... here's what it says. Here's the quote. It says, in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Because separating these students from each other, it creates the inherent inequality that will exist by giving two different educations in two different locations. So the significance of this. Well, I would argue it's probably the most significant Supreme Court ruling thus far in history. And it finally allowed for the 14th Amendment to finally be applied, at least in one part of life in the South, right? And we're going to see also that this event in 1954 acts as a moment, as a springboard for then what we will see as the rest of the civil rights movement that comes up when we talk about things in the 1960s with people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks and other big historical figures in that regard. The problem is that while this decision did end segregation in schools, it did not end segregation in pretty much anywhere else. So there was still segregation in restaurants, on buses, in bathrooms. The list goes on and on. And so we have leaders who emerge, people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., obviously right here, and they use the Brown versus Board of Education as a moment, like I said. And what's interesting to me is that they choose to continue to push against segregation and against racism in a way that we had already been seeing it through courts, through legal battles, and especially through this method we call civil disobedience. That's an important feature, or important, idea. Civil disobedience. You see, we don't see Martin Luther King getting a crowd fired up and saying, "Now let's go bomb this, government building. These racists. Let's go beat some people up." They choose civil disobedience, and so what that looks like is, well, there's a lot of different things. Civil disobedience, here's a definition. It's refusing to obey certain laws or government demands in order to try to influence law or policies. It was come up by this guy from India named Gandhi. You probably have heard of him, I'm sure. And basically what it is it's this push to try to make changes. But the way you make the changes is very, very important. You're going to try to make changes in non-violent ways. That's key. Non-violence. Rather than fighting, rather than hurting, we're going to try to do this non-violently. So we're going to do things like boycotts. We're going to have marches and rallies and protests, but peaceful ones, not riots. We're not going to break anything. We're not going to hurt anybody. We're going to picket and march and get our voices out there. Sit-ins, which is when you go to a place, and maybe if there's for instance, with segregation, maybe you're going to have a group of people sit down in a part where they're told they can't sit down, and they're going to sit there peacefully as a way to get attention and hope to be served. And again, as it says, if there's a law that feels unjust, choosing to peacefully break that law is another form of civil disobedience. So I'm going to wrap this up. You know what this is now. Most of this stuff probably wasn't even necessary because you did your homework, I hope, and you read it and you understood it already. Maybe you already knew what civil disobedience was. But here's what you're going to do with this civil disobedience information. There is a slideshow. And here's the thing. If I had been in class, we were going to do a station activity where I was going to put up posters on the wall and you were going to have a piece of paper and walk around from station to station and look at it and then write down some answers. Because I'm not here, what I've done is I've converted that into a slideshow. So let me go ahead and go over here. So this is the slideshow. I'm going to try to put a link to this in the Canvas assignment that got you to this video. And when I get here, I suggest that you watch this in presentation mode. Okay, so don't just like flip through it, looking at it in edit mode or view mode or whatever you have. Go and do presentation mode because that'll make it sort of really do what I want it to do. The font will be correct and everything. So it's still broken into stations. So station 1 is about Rosa Parks, a story many of us know very well. But look at the pictures, read the details. Most of the pictures have some sort of a caption, so try to read that. And as you go through this, if I can back up again, the substitute hopefully gave you this handout. And this has some questions that I want you to be answering and reflecting on as you look at the images. Okay, so most of them have you talk about what you observe and then reflect on how it represents that idea of civil disobedience and how effective that is. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna turn this off. You go do that slideshow. Go do the stations. And hopefully I'll be back tomorrow. If I'm not back tomorrow, then we'll be in touch as soon as I possibly can, okay? Have a good day, everybody. I will see you later.